Okay, second paragraph is Dalet. So after having explained the three inyonim, just identifying Sur Mira, Asay Toiv, and then Torah, Bakei Sholem V'Ratfeyu is Torah, and how these are reflected in the general mitzvahs of Nida, Chala, Hadlaka Saner, and then in Chala itself, as we saw on the sheet. So the Bira Inyan. The Bira Inyan, he starts to say that Ein Kamach Ein Torah, there's no flour, there's no Torah, meaning, the meaning of the Mishnah is the deeper level that Torah study should not be such that it ignores the world. And then quoting Rabbi Shmuel, that says that the avodah is dafke v'astafta deganecha, gather in your crop. Your grain. So the avodah has to be in the world. However, this has to come after the inyan of tefillah. Now he's going to explain the inyan of tefillah, which culminates al pi nigla in the Shemoneh Esrei, and the Shemoneh Esrei is where a Jew asks his requests. So he just said now that asking requests, Pashat Begashim is Panos and so on, is part of the Avodah. In fact, it is the Avodah. I don't know if he's going to say it later, but the Shaila is, especially after he's going to explain the whole Hizbonenus and Avodas of Tefillah leading up to Shemoneh Esrei, how is the culmination is a whole shopping list of requests. Shemoneh Esrei is Atzilus, is Bittul B'Metzias, it comes after even Kriyas Shema, V'Ahavta. So you know the answer to that. The answer B'Kitzer is that what it really is asking for these requests because that's what you want. You want healthy, successful Jews to be able to transform your world and make it a home for us. So for this we need health and parnasa and forgiveness and all the good things. In fact, that's why Shemoneh Esrei begins with Adonai, my Lord, Svasai Tiftach, open up my lips, Ufi Agit Lesecha, my mouth will relate your praises. The emphasis, a Jew standing there, Shemoneh Esrei is mamish in the Kodesh HaKadoshim and Heichal HaMelech, he can't speak. But God, you open my mouth because this is about what you want. That's the inyan. The Pnimius, of course, al pi nigla, al pi pshat, and the reality of our own reality is when we ask, we're asking because we want and we need. It isn't absolutely altruistic and selfless, but just knowing and having some kind of abundance and davening before then, as we're going to learn now. The next paragraph takes the edge off our selfishness. And to some degree, there's an awareness as we daven Shemoneh Esrei, as much as I want it, the Eibishter wants it and needs it from me. So that adds wings to our prayer, as it were, which wings in the sense of lifts us out of our own my needs and a relationship with Hashem. I was going to add something else now, but it slipped my mind. Shemoneh Esrei, yeah. Yeah, just worth sharing with you again. I saw this in the Oli Torah publication. What's it called? Ha'aretz Hatmimim, from Rabbi Galitsky, the beloved Rosh Yeshiva. He brings there from some Achron why it is that the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov davened at hours which are pinigla difficult to justify. There's man tefillah, there's man shachris, there's man mincha, the hours, 3 hours, 4 hours into the day, mincha at its time, and they davened, and they still do, many. How is that possible? I have to find this out, but I remember hearing somewhere that the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, not mevatel chas v'sholem, but somehow this Zmanei Tefillah, they loosened. What's the inyan? The answer is, he brings there from this Achron, a recent scholar, that what's Zman Tefillah? Zman Tefillah, B'chlal, is, Pshat level, a time when Hashem is disposed, a time of chesed and so on, disposed towards answering requests. So you want to make sure that you daven at that right time. In general, light is chesed, and the dawn starts, so the chesed is pure and intense, and so that's why the king is at certain times, and you better be there during those times. You don't want to come, and also you want to come when many people are davening also. You come with a group, so in the merit of the group, your request is more likely to be fulfilled. If you come on your own, under your own scrutiny, and yet the ministers of the king go in any time to the king. They don't have set times. And the teretz is poshut. Because the ministers, when they go into the king, they're not asking for themselves. This is the welfare of the state. This is the king's kavanah. Door open, anytime. And hence, Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, who in Chassidus, introduced Chassidus, and davening is not simply, I need and give me, but it's about a relationship with the God. And God loves us and wants to hear from us, and wants to hear that we want Him, then anytime. Tell me you love me. I want to hear it anytime. Never get tired from hearing it. Say Tildim, daven. So even if we're not holding on that level, mamish, but as we learned earlier, see, this is Yichudi law, relatively speaking, but just knowing it, we know it, we know this is the MS, it lifts us a little bit. The davening is a little bit of...
It's like the Rabbi, when the Rabbi davened mincha at midnight.
Yeah, the Rebbe would come back from the oil and daven mincha way after this man. After Tzitzak Yechavim.
It was close to midnight.
Yeah, there were times, yeah. But once you go past Tzitzak Yechavim, it's and Bechlal, but that's in the whole of the discussion. I mean, the Shachris is set to begin with 10 o'clock. It's after Zman Kriyashma in the summer for sure. Chatchila. Okay, you have to say Shema before. The idea is that you start davening these bonus during the time, and it takes time. But overall, they get it in now, because now's when it's a different kind of davening. Binyan Bazeh, did we finish the first? Yeah? Yeah, Binyan Bazeh. Second paragraph is Dalet. The Yini Yadua, it's known, Shachiluk bein Tefillah, the Torah, who the difference between Tefillah and Torah is Tefillah, Ya'allah Melamata Lamayra. Tefillah is from below to above. It's man addressing God. As I mentioned yesterday, who composed Tefillah? We composed Tefillah. The Torah, Yamshach Melamayra Lamata. Torah is the Eibishter's words to us. Torah is God telling us how much He needs us, and Tefillah is us telling God how much we need Him and want Him. Or more than that, responding to His need for us. Okay, I'm here, Hineni, I'm yours. The Hinei, Iker Yinatfilu, and that's just going to kind of develop here. Iker Yinatfilu, what's the Yin of davening? What's the Iker of davening? Holiyes bebechinas hispailos vislavos hanefesh. It's all about the soul being in a state of hispailos, of emotion, excitement, emotion, vislavos, and inflamed. Lales el Hashem, to ascend to the Eibishter, l'dovka bain, to cleave to Him. Ubishvil zeh, because of that, that's the bottom line, is God, the Eibishter wants to feel our love. So b'shvil zeh hu calling in ha'is bonanas v'asagibalikus, and for that is the whole meditation and the understanding of godliness that a yid is to engage in davening. It's not for these bonanas per se. That's learning. Davening is not a time for learning, and yet a person thinks, or should, and think over the Maimer that he learned and think very deeply. So is it learning or is it davening? Pirush HaMilah is learning. So he says here, well, it is learning, but the learning is not for the learning's sake. The whole point of the learning, the isboninus, the understanding, is to engender and move the heart. That a yid should have a desire for godliness. Spelling it out now. Even though the understanding itself, if you understand something, there is, it's settled and it's satisfying. You learn a beautiful pshat in the pasuk. Does anybody remember? It's not the Maamar of 3 or 4 Maamarim ago. It's the one I wanted you to write up, Adam, but timing wasn't good. The whole beer there of Avraham, Atohu Hashem Elikim, and Avraham, and then the Midas, the 7 nations, the whole Avodah of Avraham, Kitzadik, that's one level of Avodah, and then there's Avodah that's conquering the 7 nations, and there's the conquering of Amalek. That was the Purim, I guess it was the Purim Maamar. Okay, you forgot. There was a whole beautiful Isboninus. It's worth, I don't know, it's just worth, you know what, even singling out that part of the Maamar. Because the main Maamar is Amalek. But to understand Amalek, it's a whole beard in the general Avodah, B'chol Levavcha. It's a paragraph or 2, it's very beautiful. We learned it. We owe to the Rebbe. He gave his heart and soul to say this Maamar. We learned it. Let's at least remember it. If it comes to those words, maybe on Shabbos you stop and think about them, at least during the week. Bing, ting, something on this, something of what the Maamar explained, it lifts the whole davening. Okay, maybe you'll do that. So the whole point so on the one hand he says, on the one hand, even though if you're thinking and understanding the psukim, so this is Giloy Oir Benafshay. So the person himself he's illuminated, as opposed to longing. Longing is a dissatisfaction. So a bit of a contradiction. If the part of davening that is understanding is Gishmak, Gila Irben Nafsha, he's irradiated with light. He's enlightened, his understanding is davening. And it says Yashvus, it's settled. It's satisfying. We don't mean this is an ego trip, just the nature of Seichel is. You understand something, it's internalized, and it's called bread, sustenance, it nourishes you. We're not talking being nourished now, we're talking about a longing. A hunger for more, a thirst for more. And this is the opposite. So he continues, and understanding something, satisfaction, a spiritual satisfaction. Again, it's a gishmak, a beautiful insight, a beautiful teaching. Says the Rebbe Mikol Mokaim Tachlis, a kavon bazeh, he wants the Tachlis, is not the understanding of the inyan per se, and the gishmak and how beautiful it is, although that must be part of it. But that this should engender a longing for godliness, be slavus, rishpeish, in flames like tongues of fire, ha'tshukah, thirsting v'tzimoin, or longing and thirsting. I'm just going to throw this in, but it shouldn't be a distraction because the Maamar is talking to us. It goes without saying. And as we have the privilege to sit here and learn the Maamar, so the Rebbe is saying the Maamar again now. That's a Beferish Gemara. His lips move and he says together, the Baal HaShmur, the Baal HaMaamar says, the teaching over is the one who learns it. But I'm just, in parenthesis therefore, I think the Rebbe himself said it, that the Maamar that he said Shabbos is according to where the Bachrim conduct themselves, learn Chassidus that week, and generally conduct themselves. 1963, if you know the Baruch in 770, then B'nai Aliyah, and Oivdim and Maskilim. Rosh Yeshivas came from that time, Mashpiyim. The whole genre of Mashpiyim and Rosh Yeshivas, pretty much, well, at least one generation, were the height of their Baruch years were just really starting in 1963 and 770, and they were Oivdim, many of them. The Rebbe is giving here how to daven. So let's continue. Again, Chas v'Sholom, this has been a piece of history, 1963. This is Mahim, but it's Chas v'Sholom. If that's, we should close the Sefer and finish. We're abusing it. The Mahim is talking to us. I'm just giving you, there's also that external dimension. So what's the ikar of these bondanis? The ikar of these bondanis is to move the heart for longing. For lochein, so how do you get to this if you understand it, then it's satisfying. So therefore, it continues, the ikar of these bonanis is not the chachma and not the bina, but the das. And das know God, your Father. What's the meaning of das? Chachma and bina is, you understand that chachma is epiphany. Oh, I get it. And then bin is really analyze it and can write a book, can write a summary of the Maimer at Chachma and Binda, and write a beautiful, make a beautiful chart, or better still, a beautiful essay that Aaron's going to write for us on that section of davening there. That's Chachma and Binda, and I could stop there. What's das?
Yeah, hopefully Aaron will also put in some das there.
It's hard to put in das in what he writes. That's up to you and I.
His own das, and we'll apply it to ourselves.
You can't give das. You can't give das. You can give the Chachma and Binda. That's an effective teacher. The das is up to the student. Because what's the das? So, with all due respect, I mean, maybe we'll get a sense of it, but it's not going to help us. What's das? He binds his mind strongly to the subject until he feels it, not just understands it and knows it, but feels it. There's the famous moshel of what das is, which the Rebbe quoted. This was a moshel that Groinem, the famous mashpia if you all heard it, I say Bekitzer, in Lubavitch, would say when he taught Tanya Perigimel. And the first time this was written up was Rabbi Perlov. Rabbi Perlov is Shane Markowitz's great-grandfather. He was the Rav in Melbourne. Big Talmud Chachma, big Lamdan. Very interesting chassid. Never saw the Rebbe physically. Bottle. When the hookups began, he used to come, of course, this is in the late mid-70s, dressed in Shabbos, situk, gartel, and sit. She was old man already then, and sit and listen, bittul. He wanted to come to the Rebbe said no. He wanted to come. At any rate, so he wrote, like many, not enough. The Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe pushed this very strongly. The older Chassidim should write their stories that they were witness to and heard. And some did. And he was one of them. So he had a big schus that when it was published, it's called Shemos V'Sipurim, the Rebbe told over one of his stories, and it's this, what I'm going to tell you now. That's a moshel that Groinem gave, the Shmuel Groinem Esteman, the Mashpia in Lubavitch, to what is das. And what's the moshel? You all know the story. That there was the Yeshuvnik in the old days. People lived in little hamlets. There was no minyan. There was no nothing. And so if the Yeshuvnik, the fellow that lived there, could afford it, there was no school, no cheder. He hired a malamed to spend weeks, months on end at his home. The malamed would go back for Yontif. And the Yeshuvnik, for Yontif himself, for Hashem Kippur, would go to the city. But otherwise, so one day a letter comes to the Yeshuvnik, The Yeshuvniks were illiterate for the most part. You can't read it, so he gives the letter to the Melamed, the guy that he hired to teach his children. Melamed opens the letter and he's reading it aloud. The letter is written by a neighbor of the Yeshuvnik's father who lives in the city, and the neighbor regrets to inform the Yeshuvnik that his father passed away. The Melamed reads the letter, and the Yeshuvnik faints, hearing the news his father passed away. So Groinim would then ask the Bachrim, he said, one sec, let's analyze the story a little bit here. Who understands better what happened? The Melamed, he read the letter. He didn't faint. And the Yeshuvnik hears just what the Melamed is reading, he faints. For sure the Melamed should have fainted. And of course he smiles, the answer is, because it's his father. That's what Das is. That's what Das is. We're talking about my father. This is my Eibishter. We're not talking the grandeur of the divine and how creation happens. Yesh ma'ayin and the Havayin Elikim. Das means to internalize it, to personalize it. This is God talking to me. This is His Giluyim and Etzem and all of the wonderful manifestation. All for what? Because the Eibishter wants a relationship with me and with every Yid. That's Das. So first of all, it happens. You got to think over the mind again and again. First, it's got to be very clear. You have to understand, and think about it again and again and again. But it's the orientation of the way you think. Not thinking about it as to be able to spew it back in the exam and write out a nice, get a good mark. That's not Das. Das is thinking about it, tying, iskashrus. V'odom yodes chava. And Odom knew chava. Torah describes intimacy as Das. Why? Because it's connecting to the other person. Allowing that person into your life. That's what Das means. And you're entering into their lives. Crossing. Not connecting. Becoming one. In. So that's what he's saying. That's the ikar of davening. Let's continue the words of the Maimer. Okay, you do as it's known. Shebasoga bilvad, just understanding alone. Leiti, you say to this, it's not going to stir the heart. It's going to stir the mind. But not the heart. It's only when the understanding is personalized and internalized. One fastens oneself to it. The sense, the feeling of it. Let's read the words of the Maimon. Even without going to pratim now, but even in intellect, there's the emotions within intellect. There's the hergish, I had to define the word hergish, but the feeling literally that's associated with understanding, which is beyond the intellectual component. There's an intellectual, emotional attachment to ideas. You're saying no, it's even more than that. What he has to feel is not the beauty of the idea, but feel the godliness of it. Again, it's my God, it's my Eibishter, Elikai. There's a famous teaching of the Shalah. See this quote. We say in the Shira, Elikai Avi Varim Emenu. No, how does it start? Zeh Keli V'yanvehu. Elikai Avi Varim Emenu. This is my God, Vanvehu, and I will glorify Him. Elikai Avi, the God of my father, V'rimenu, I will exalt Him. So I think it's the Shalah. So note the difference. Zeh Keli, it's my God. Va'anvehu anivuhu. We're one. Elikai Avi, it's my father's God. It's tradition. I mean tradition in the sense of it's not true, but it's not personalized. Varim Emenu, I exalt Him. I remove God and make Him this grand God, but not mine. It's got to be Zeh Keli. Then Va'anvehu anivuhu. Elikai Avi, it says in the Maimah, it's the Rebbe's God, it's my father's God, it's the God of my fathers. I believe in Him and He's there, but He hovers from a distance. The ikid is to feel the godliness of it, the personal Eibishter, and that, through that, is mispoil. That's when he awakens with a love and a longing. But Prot Yisrael in even more detail now. We have stuff to think about, boys, and to feel. So how does davening begin? The psukim, the zimra, words, psukim of praise, of song. In brackets, the achrei ha'kedomas ha'idov ha'kabolas oil. This comes after. We don't start off singing. It starts off with the prefacing, the hidah, the acknowledgement, the thanks, gratitude. It starts with gratitude. And then Kabbalah's oil, accepting the yoke, Sheba'amiris Meida'ani, which we express when a Jew says Meida'ani, and then again, before he starts davening proper, and Hoidul Hashem, offer thanks to God, acknowledge God. So that's the foundation. The foundation is gratitude. But then comes what Psuke de Zimra. So what's Psuke de Zimra? Sho'inyan ha'ispailus ha'midas. So the emotions are getting stirred here. Ma'izbonenus the bri yesh ma'ayin. From thinking into creation. And what's creation? Creation is yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. Va'ispailus ha'midas bezehu yosem min asaga. But the excitement is more than the intellect. Explain the intellectual understanding of it. Why? We'll just say the words and we'll try and explain it. The main point, the objective here is the haflah, the wonder, shebinyan ha'isavus in creation, because the wonder, the wow of it, rather than shari etzim ba'inyan the isavus yesh ma'ayin, because the actual creation itself, which only God can do. That's beyond understanding. The main thing is the haflah. So he's saying like this. Haflah means the wonder, pele. Yesh ma'ayin is fundamentally incomprehensible. How does God do this? We can't understand it. It's just the mitzias. We can't understand it. We can't even imagine it. Can't imagine yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing, because as soon as you imagine something, it's something. So all we can say is nothing. What's nothing? No thing. No, not that, not that, not that, not black holes, not empty space, nothing. So that's not a true grasp. True grasp, asagas hachiyuv, is when you understand something for what it is, and you fundamentally cannot understand creation for what it is because it is not. It starts with ayin. So it's hasagas hashalila. We can just say what it isn't. So the seichel part of it, like, okay, creation is, you surrender it. Can't understand that, it's over. So what's left? So that's it's short shrift. It's a short isboneness. Once we understand what yesh ma'ayin is, it can't be understood, can't be imagined. Meditation over, file it away. That's not going to stir the heart. So therefore he says, the isboneness is not the seichel, meaning to say the mechanics of it, which are beyond understanding, but the haflah, the wonder, that remains. The wonder. That God can do this. Not how, beyond understanding, but that he does. And he's bringing creation every moment into being. The net result, the haflah, the wonder, that creation is every moment, and it comes. Only God can do it without understanding how. But now it's the result. Again, the wow factor, that's got to be the primary hisboneness of yesh ma'ayin. Are we kind of clear? So that's the ikid, is the haflah, which go back a few lines. It's more than the hasaga. The understanding is over. It's done. It's beyond understanding. We acknowledge that and surrender to it. Can't imagine it, can't understand how God creates out of nothing. But the ispilus, the haflah, the wow, that continues. And that's got to be the ikar of the davening. Not the understanding or the recognition of the limitation of understanding of how creation works. And in brackets he adds further, Okay, we'll stop here. Because it's in the bracket is important. Because there's two parts of Pesukei de Zimra. There's the Yesh Ma'ayin, because we're talking about creation at large. And then there's the detail, Maraba Masecha, Magodla Masecha. So we'll talk about that Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.